Coming to you from the M&M Exterior Studio in Nooksville, Virginia, this is Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle, the introvert's extrovert. She talks to people so you don't have to. For now.
I would love to, have you share who you are and, we can dive into your story because what I love, you and I connected and it was like, you can just tell when people we are on the same page, growth, healing. And I say a lot how our stories are different, but pain, love, all of that is universal. And so I think it's important to share our stories and whatever we're comfortable with and because I'm big on boundaries. But whatever someone's comfortable with, it's so important to share that because there's so many universal things that we can get out of it. So I appreciate you being willing to chat and kind of dive more into you and all of your growth and healing, because I know as a writer, a blogger and whatnot, that you have a lot to share. So.
Well, great. So I'll just jump in. I would tell people that I think sometimes I would have this Reader's Digest condensed version that you kind of tell people about when they ask, well, where are you from and where'd you grow up? And so, I could say, oh, I'm from New Jersey and my mom's an attorney and, I was in the Army and all those things are true. But then when you dig into the more expanded version, I had a lot of just rejection in my childhood. And when I talk about not being able, not outrunning it, I just tried to compartmentalize my life. A lot of the things that happened to me growing up, my mom was a teenage mother that really had a lot of big dreams, very intelligent, scholarship to college, got pregnant in her senior year, and really just was like, this whole baby thing is going to slow me down. I have goals, I have dreams. And I'm saying this now through a lot of healing and therapy. There was a lot of years of just why? And we argued and fought and she really didn't have answers. And I just had to just make peace that she didn't have the capacity to give me what I felt like I needed in a mom. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, back in those days, she had me and I was sent to live with a friend of my grandmother's just because of different, financial situation. I wasn't able to stay in the family home. My mom actually went off to college to Rutgers University to pursue her dreams. And I was sent to live with another whole family that I didn't know. And they were great, but it was just that sense of knowing I don't really belong here. I was there. I was pretty well cared for from newborn till about age 6. And then I don't know all of the stories, but some way I was, my mom at that time was married, had my sister and was in law school. And it was like, okay, we're coming to get her. And so I was pretty stable in that environment. And I was then taken to my mom, my stepfather and my younger sister. And through that time, I would kind of see them on weekends here or there. Again, because my mom was very young, she never wanted me to call her mom. I kind of always viewed her as a big sister. It's just layers of things, right?
So many layers. Yeah.
Yeah. And along with that, my dad just was not in the picture at all. It was just, his family, it was just questions around paternity and, whatever, all those sordid Hallmark story kind of things that I probably can make a lot of money writing a movie script, but it's real. And so I didn't know him at all. Yeah. So I lived a lot between those years of just being very into myself, always, because I didn't quite feel like I belonged in that environment. My stepfather was okay, but I always knew he wasn't my dad. Mm-hmm. And then he and my mom had a very tumultuous marriage. There was domestic violence. They fought, and we just were in a series of being sent to different family for the summer, or, we would move and then they would get back together, and they finally divorced when I was around 11. Mm-hmm. And just as the oldest, I just was responsible. Like I had these two younger sisters by that point. My mom, like I said, was an attorney. She worked long hours. And I mean, just from 11 or 12, I was it was 70s and 80s. We were latchkey kids.
Yeah.
I was cooking dinner. So I kind of grew up in survival mode. It was just survival. Things really turned for the worse. My mom got married again when we were older. Her second husband was very, he was just not a kind man at all. And, at that point, my sisters would kind of be going with their dad on visitation. I spent a lot of time alone with this guy, and he was just a mean man. I would say, looking back now with knowledge and therapy, I feel like he was grooming me probably for some sexual, thing.
Yeah.
Lot of just no boundaries. He just, burst into your room, and just targeted on me. And my mom was kind of just oblivious. I mean, again, I just think she was just in her own world, like focused on herself, even as a mom. And when we've gone through, my sisters and I, we laugh now, but we feel like she's a person that I don't know why she ever had children. Like, I just don't know. She just, I don't know. We've made peace with it, but she was just kind of in her own world. And so I remember a point when I got very uncomfortable with him. We were home alone, and I had gotten out of the shower. He came in my room, and I was like, hey, you need to leave. You can't. I was around 13, 14. You need to leave. And so I got the courage up to tell my mom. And I just thought, like, this is it. This guy will be out of here. And they had a whole argument, whatever. And he comes and says, well, I didn't mean anything by it. I view you as a daughter. I didn't mean anything by it. And so at that point, I realized, okay, I just have to survive. And so I found friends to go with, and I went to, I stayed with my different aunts or whoever. Whenever my sisters weren't home, I would leave as well and go to other places. So again, that kind of gives you just the backdrop of my life. And so I was just trying to make it to 18 to just get away. Like, I just thank God for teachers and people that poured into me, that helped me imagine a life that was different, that I could achieve something that was different than what I had grown up in. And so I just ran away. At 18, I went into the military, and it was a great fit for me. And again, through healing and hindsight, I was looking for just that order and rules. I became a very rule oriented. Like, if you just follow the rules, do the right thing, results will come, because my upbringing was so chaotic and so crazy. But part of that, it also caused me to be very minimized. Like, because things were so volatile at home, you just didn't want to make a fuss. I would be that one calming my sisters down, and you just don't want to upset anything because the adults have their own crazy going on. And so
you end up managing their emotions. Like you learned how to, it sounds like I should say, you learned how to, what do I need to do to keep the peace and to protect yourself too? That's what I heard too, is that you had to figure out a way to protect yourself, which is, heartbreaking for all of the, you and I have talked before, about kind of the child within us, and it's kind of hard to revisit that, but it's so important. So, and I thank you too for sharing so much of your story. And I think that when your life is normal, you know what I mean? Meaning like everyone's own life, you don't know anything different.
Right.
And so therefore it's normal to you. And I think, and why I'm just so passionate about and appreciative of people sharing their stories. And I just kind of even like, just like little goosebumps, even you just talking about with your stepfather, like coming into your room at 13 and things like that, like that was inappropriate, and thank God you knew that, like, whoa, this is not good. But there's so many people who I feel like have moments from their life, and it's like, it became cliche almost that like, oh, your childhood affects you, almost that people make fun of that. And now it's like, you guys, it's actually legit stuff.
Yeah.
And we compartmentalize so much. And so it's like the whole, oh, I'm fine. I turned out fine. I may have had these little incidences here and there, but it's normal. It's fine. And until you kind of unpack it, it's like, no, nope, that shouldn't have happened. And I think just, one, we want to share that, be more mindful with our kids, to protect them, but also for the child in all of us, like people listening, is that there might be stuff from your childhood that you've kind of accepted as normal or thought that it wasn't a big deal, or as you said, compartmentalized. And then you realize like, wait a second, maybe my strict lifestyle, maybe this, the way I'm thinking that life is about following the rules and then I won't get hurt. Maybe it is all connected, and it is worth, like you've said a few times, through therapy and healing. Like, how did you go from kind of, like you said, you were in the military, you needed that rigid lifestyle, but what's kind of started happening that helped you break through that compartmentalization?
Well, I'll say two things. Number one is my faith, really coming into understanding God, understanding a higher power, and, just pouring it all out to him, trying to really pray through it, understand, make peace. Then secondly, not that it's such a tragic tale, but really having, a very, very devastating moment in my prior marriage. I was married, just recently divorced, right at a year ago. And
just a year ago, you got divorced.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Just a year ago. And I will say it was probably the first half. We were married 19 years. So the first half was probably fairy tale, good little Christian couple, raising their two little children, living the dream. But the second half of our marriage, it really started to become apparent. My husband had some different mental health challenges, but also there was infidelity in our marriage. And that broke me, I will say, because I was not a person looking to get married. I always wanted to be a mom. I thought I would, adopt a couple of kids and just be a single mom. Yeah. And really part of my coping mechanisms from childhood was really to be very walled off. And I really didn't trust people. I just became very self-sufficient. And so
ultra independence, right? Like ultra
exactly.
independence.
I just felt like, if your mama and daddy that made you kind of aren't there for you, you can't put anything past anybody. Yeah. So it was this weird irony, because I'm a generally optimistic person. I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky person, but at the same time, I would just never be surprised by anything that anyone would do, because I just didn't expect a lot from people. And so my ex was just this ultra charismatic, romantic guy, really, really swept me off my feet. And, I just felt like, okay, well, he's choosing me. In my mind, again, in my black and white kind of rule-oriented mind, it was like, okay, well, he's choosing me, he's pursuing me, whatever. And so again, through our marriage, different things began to unfold for him. And we struggled along with him coming to terms with some of his own childhood wounds. But at the same time, there were just these unhealthy patterns around boundaries, inappropriate relationships. And in my kind of just, I'm going to make it work, I'm going to soldier on. I read all the books of Praying Wife. And
if I can just be good enough, if I can just do all the right things, then everything will be better, because it's all up to me, because I'm the one who has control over this.
Exactly. And I wore myself out. I literally at a point, I thought I was going to lose my mind trying to keep my marriage together because he just wasn't ready. And so I liken it to like someone that commits murder via a DUI, they have a problem with alcoholism. It is an addiction. Maybe it's not their fault. Maybe they're chemically, wired to this, but there has to be consequences because they took a life. And so at a point, I had to, again, get still with God and let go of all the counselors and the people that meant well. They meant well, well, he's sorry and he's got this. And I just had to come to that moment where the Holy Spirit just said, release, like you've got to release this control. Release. You can't control him. You cannot pray against his will. It's not, his healing is not on you. You're not bad. Because it took me back to that little girl that was just, am I bad? Is it my fault? What can I do? It's all on me to fix this. And I just released it all. But it was the catalyst for me to finally get at the root. I thought I had dealt with all of my mommy and daddy stuff.
Yeah.
I thought I had dealt with it. And I had to go back to that little girl and realize that she was still trying to be good enough, trying to be whatever enough, thin enough, dress right enough, again, pray enough, get the kids together enough. And I hit that point of like, girl, you are enough. Like if you don't achieve another thing, if you gain 49 pounds, like you are enough in all of your God-given self right here today.
Yes. That's what I mean. Like, the stories can be different from person to person, but these, and one of my past guests, Christina Ammerman, talked about core wounds and, kind of, it comes down to like love and unworthiness. Those are kind of the two she talks about. And it's like, dang, she's right. Like it always seems to come down to these things and these patterns keep playing out. And you said with your ex-husband that his healing was not dependent on me. And how often do we put that pressure on ourselves when it was never ours to bear,
right,
for other people? And,
Yeah. And I remember, again, as a believer, it's like, keep this family together, keep this family together. And one of the turning points was, and my kids, you don't mind me sharing this, we were just doing our back to school physicals and such. And, my younger daughter, they went through this whole mental health assessment. And I'm just thinking, because we thought we were hiding everything. And I thought I tell people I was like Edith Bunker around my house, because my husband, it would just be ups and downs. And we were just on eggshells in the house all the time. And, there was this one persona outside and, just this different persona inside. And honestly, I do not think he was conscious of it, but my wiring just again, I just took it on to that's on me. So I just would run around and, daddy and keeping them quiet. So anyway, we're at the doctor and she's like, we have to ask these questions. Are you feeling, anxious or depressed? And I'm just thinking, we're going to check no. And she actually says yes. And my ear perked up. And so the doctor goes down the whole list of like, are you bullied? Is something going on at school? Is it academics? And she said, no, it's my home. It's at home. I have so much anxiety at home. And I could have just like collapsed on the floor. And so we talked later and, figured out different ways of responding. And that's where kind of the boundaries came in, where I realized, what I could take control of was when these certain things are playing out, we're going to do some other choices. Like, for example, we're not going to sit through crazy dinners that leave somebody breaking down in tears because of some nonsense that we don't even know what's going on in your head. I'm not going to subject us again, just these highs and lows and ups and downs, we're going to put some boundaries around it. And so we just started doing different things. We would leave. We would, just go on a drive, me and the kids. Like I just was like, we don't have to stay and take this. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that I've learned is I kind of did, and I know it's a common thing where I felt like, well, it's not as bad as this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I just kind of justified like, well, we have this wonderful house in Gainesville, the corner lot, and, we go on vacations.
Everything
and,
looks great.
He's not beating me, like my bar was so low, like he's not hitting me, and I just couldn't name it. I couldn't put it together to feel like I deserved intervention, that I deserved help. Because I was looking here and there and like, well, I'm the helper. I help people. People would look at my life and say, you should be lucky. You should just push through. Like, it's not that bad. But
and the people who do,
bad.
Well, and that's why it's like, we need to be cautious of who we listen to because everyone's got their own stuff. So if they are telling you that, it's like, you don't know what kind of stuff they're pushing through, what they're pushing, repressing, like, and the eggshells. It's funny when you talked about the eggshells and you talked about your childhood and everything. It's like, that's the norm, is walking on eggshells is the norm. And I know for me, I've talked a lot about like, I'm a recovering people pleaser, and just managing other people's emotions. And for me, it's like moving around so much and like wanting to make friends and realizing that that's not normal to always be feeling the need to manage other people's emotions, if I do this, then this. And but once again, I would never have thought, if I'm in situations like that, it's like, well, it's not that bad. It's not XYZ.
Right.
But the amount of anxiety you have. And then your daughter, the other thing I heard is just major, again, like kudos, whatever the term is, like applaud you for listening to your daughter, because when she said about the anxiety at home, like you could have done a different coping mechanism, which was to dismiss that and tell her it's not that bad. We should be thankful that but the fact that you took action and made a new choice. And I feel like that is where those generational curses and generational habits get broken, because like you made a new choice. You said, I'm going to hear this and I'm going to do something about it, versus letting it shut me down, because I think we just all are in our coping mechanisms and just doing what we have to do, like you said, to survive. Mm-hmm. And like I said, everyone's story, the details are different, but it's just no matter, we're human, so we're wired to survive. And so just making that new choice, I feel like it was a small part of the story, but so big, big. Because when people tell you how they feel, we should believe them. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I didn't, obviously, it wasn't like, okay, we're leaving because of this, but I didn't want her to ever feel like, the divorce is my fault. But it was definitely kind of that final trigger of we need to get healthy. It wasn't about right or wrong. I got out of that toxic, like shame, blame thing with my husband. It was about like our health. We cannot get healthy together because of whatever, fill in the blank of 10 different things. Yep. And, I was open to a potential for reconciliation, but I knew that we had to separate and each work on ourselves and not work on this marriage. And I told a friend of mine, like, I felt like I was going to just like die, like as a sacrifice at the altar of marriage, and having that epiphany with God. Like, he, of course, loves marriage. He created the covenant of marriage, but he values us individually more than any institution. And I had to just unlearn some of that church culture, because again, it wasn't anything you could put your hand on, where someone like that fit into the handful of scriptures of how you, I was always seen as like, you just need to forgive him. Like, you're just walking in unforgiveness. And I'm like, no, it's a pattern. I'm gonna die.
Thank you. I feel like that's a whole other series that we could do, because I have a lot of, I have a heart for that, because, for me, like personally, I'm a Christian, and it's just, I feel like the older I get, the more sensitive I am to, can't even think there's a term right now. I guess spiritual abuse is kind of a term that's being thrown around. Yeah. I don't know if that's the appropriate to use right now, but it's just when the word of God and all this stuff and God's will is just manipulated, seemingly for good, but not. And like I said, this is like a whole other bigger topic, but just, and I feel like with marriage and being in unhealthy marriages is just, that's like a tender spot, for me, because I've, seen people walk through it and just want to be mindful of it. And then for my own marriage too, for us to just walk in the light with all our stuff too, and not have to feel like it has to be this perfect. Cause that's something I struggle with, is like wanting, like you said, I think it's like, oh, everything's great. Our world is great, but we all have got stuff and it's got to get worked out. And if it doesn't, I feel like that's that dying inside. We're all just dying.
Well, what I say, what I've come to some conclusion with the church piece of it is really gaining an understanding within those institutions of when you need to release people and advise them to go into psychological counseling, like knowing when it's beyond a pastoral counseling. And that's not saying that you're not hearing from God and you don't, have this spiritual authority, but you're not a psychologist. And you don't have, if you don't have like a really deep knowledge and expertise in marital counseling. And again, in our case, very, very complex psychological things that were mental health things going on. It doesn't take anything off of you. That's not your job. Like, you're not equipped, and it's okay.
And God created that. Like, he created the study of the brain and the mental health. Like, I mean, that's just my own personal thing. So I'm grateful. My pastor, he actually just did a series with someone who was a pastor, and he's now a therapist and whatnot. And just, that was the whole conversation around mental and spiritual health and how they coexist. It's not one or the other. And I was just like, it was a Zoom thing, but I'm at home, like applauding, like, thank you. Because, it's this whole idea that if you're going through a struggle, you just need to believe, you just need to have faith, and it's like, when it comes to this growth and healing, our childhoods, whether it's all this stuff, like, no, this is, God has equipped us. I mean, that's why I feel like we are called to be in community. That's why I want to share. It's because we're not meant to do it alone. And I think that that's where that shame lives, is in the dark. And when we hide, it's almost the stuff we feel like we need to hide. It's like, it always is the stuff that needs to be shared. Maybe not publicly,
right.
It is always the stuff, like, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, and I'll just speak from my own experience as a single in church, it was a lot of women's Bible studies or, singles groups about preparing for marriage. And I don't want to say that none of that was, was a lot of good information, but I think wholeness needs to be a part of the conversation, and really, investigating those things. Everything just can't be prayed over, or, again, in my early tradition, I just thought I could, pray hard enough, go to enough Bible studies, and I'm going to just leave it at the altar. Well, but I need to deal with this stuff. I need to
leave it at the altar and go to therapy.
Yes.
You can do both.
Yes. Yep. So I think we're getting there. I would say, we're getting there. I listened to a good podcast with Lisa Turkhurst. It was a therapy and theology. And it was excellent. I love that series. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Her, the road that she's walked and her openness with it. I just feel like she's helping so many people, because it's just lifting so many veils of shame, but just, and it's whether you are, a Christian or not, like, there is just this, we all want to put our best foot forward. I talk a lot about like social media. We all say we want real, but if you look at who has all the followers on Instagram. It's all the polished and the photoshopped and the edited. It's like, so, we're all kind of walking hypocrites. Like we want real, but not too real. Like I want to hear your story, but if it starts to get uncomfortable, then maybe not. And so it's just like, and she calls that out. I've been I've read a couple of her books recently, and it's like, she talks about her childhood, her husband's childhood. It's like stuff I'm like clapping as I read it. I'm listening to it. I'm like, thank you. Yes. Thank you for bringing this into this world, because it's so huge. And that actually reminds me of something you and I have also talked about, is how nothing's wasted, right. Like, because I'm still struggling. Like I'm working on it. I'm trying really hard. I have a freaking podcast about failure and how it's all good and it moves us forward. But like, I still struggle with like, and this is something God is like working out, just that, oh man, I know this is for good, but I just didn't want it to happen. I didn't want this hardship or this, right. And just getting to a place where it's all part of the story. And so how have you kind of walked through that so that you can not be on the eggshells and say, nothing is wasted?
Well, I will say a couple of things. I had to get to a point of, again, my, all these fancy terms now, like toxic positivity, because I am a very positive person. And I probably did have rose-colored glasses on quite a bit, and just wanting and believing and hoping for this great redemption story of like, we made it through the fire, And so part of that, right, was me feeling like, okay, well, God allowed it, so I just need to embrace it, Mm-hmm. And parsing out the degrees. So I don't think God intended for any of us to be abused. I don't think that's his plan. But I believe when we are broken open and really walk through a healing process, that it can be used for his glory, that it can draw people in, that, we're in a fallen world and there's a lot of pain and a lot of just terrible things that happen. And so when we do have these redemption stories, that I can have a redemption story in Christ that may not look like what I thought the end result was going to be, that I can trust him. And part of that is finding joy on the journey, that when I'm out of the struggle and strife and so long, I just felt like, again, all these things out of context, like, well, this is just my thorn and this is just what I have to go through. But believing that with God, there is also ease and joy and fulfillment. That's where I say nothing is wasted. And again, for me, it was finding that balance of, I don't need to, be happy that I was abused or neglected, but I can know without a shadow of a doubt that that is not what God intended for me. And as I draw closer to him and allow him into all of those broken places, I can become beautiful. And I think, I love what you're doing. And for me, I had someone recently, I think, inbox me like on LinkedIn, like, wow, I can't believe, what prompted you to share so openly. And I think it's important because a lot of times people, for my case, they see this marriage, this person that just looks like they've achieved and done all these things, and military veteran, and then it's like, oh, something bad happens and people just go dark and then you just come out on the other side. And it's just, I think it's in that in between, in that going through it, that again helps people to feel less alone. It helps other people to connect and recognize, again, as a believer, that if God did it for Danielle, for Samantha, that he can do it for me. And whatever little part of it that they resonate with, it just helps to connect. And so, when you're healing, and for me, I had to work through the embarrassment and realize, go down that trail of what's that about, but also sharing in a way that is not gunning for my ex or just uncovering in some unsavory manner, but I think it's important to be honest and transparent because I know how isolated I felt. I know that I just felt like no one in the world could understand what I was dealing with. And it's very scary to be in that place. And so however God brings things through my story, I count it as a privilege. And I think that, until Jesus returns, we are the hands and feet on the earth. And that if we all just kind of show that highlight reel on social media, it's not doing anybody any good.
It's so funny you said the hands and feet. So I was talking to my pastor because just 2020 was a year. It was a year for us. But I'm a firm believer, like you said it so beautifully, God doesn't want like abuse and harm for us. But I truly believe, though, that like he can use things for good, the things that were meant to harm, it did harm us, but we can move forward from that. And but I was talking to someone and I said, dang it. It's like when you pray for patience, the way you get the patience, you have to go through stuff. And I said, I used to be like, Lord, let me be the hands and feet of Jesus, just like threw that prayer around. And then when life really hits the fan and it gets like really, really hard, I was like, wait, shoot, I've prayed to be hands and feet of Jesus. I just wanted to help people. I just wanted to like serve people. That's what I meant by be the hands and feet of Jesus. I didn't mean like I had to die to myself, like really just deal with all that inner stuff and do hard stuff. Like it just, it's a lot, but that's the thing I said, he calls us to be in community and to, live in the light. Cause it's just, people are just walking around. It's so hard. And it is a fine line, like you said, of not wanting to share too much. I think that's why if we feel called to share stuff, because there's other people that I feel like will judge you or will say, you shouldn't share that. And why would you do that? But it's like, well, because if no one did, how would we know? So there's a lyric in a Lauren Daigle song. It says, he gave me a story of revival. So I put it on vinyl and I heard that early in 2020. And I was like, dang, man, that just like stuck out. And obviously because doing a podcast, but just when I think, whether you're a believer or not, when you just go through hard times and you can come out the other side, it's just important to share it, but important to share. Like you said, I love how you said the in-between stuff. Because it's like when you do, if there's the weight loss stuff before and after, like, and also that's not even what it's important because it's all this head stuff and heart stuff. That's what I'm finally figuring out. Like, doesn't matter what weight I am, whether I'm at my heaviest or my thinnest, like still messed up here when it comes to my weight. I still have body issues.
Exactly.
So that's the stuff we need to go through. It's not just the before and after, or, I had a hard time and now here I am. It's the hard stuff. So as we wrap it up, I would love, I talk so much about growth and healing and therapy and counseling and working through our stuff. And you said it too. So I guess my final thing is if someone knows in their heart, because let's just say it right. Because like, I know with my life, as things have kind of unfolded in my life, I'm like, oh, that's what that was. That intuition I had, there was a gut feeling that something was off, but it's like, you know what? I'm just going to tuck that over here. Because if I just do everything right, then everything will turn out fine.
Yes.
And when, life hits the fan, I know for at least me personally, it was like, that's what that was. That was intuition. And if you're a believer, I think also that's that Holy Spirit that was talking. And so hearing your story and then, I know there, like you said, there's so many people out there who feel alone and struggling. So if your story brings up those feelings and it's like, that might be that intuition, might be that intuition telling you something's not right. Whether it's marriage, whether it's just yourself, just something needs to be revisited, maybe something hard, painful from your past. Could you share some insight on kind of taking that step to go down that road that can feel dark and scary, but worth it?
Sure. I think for me, I had to begin to trust myself. And so again, bringing it back to kind of my childhood and connecting the dots, for me, in all of that chaos, I tell people like my danger meters were off, because it's just, again, well, it's not that bad. Like we would always say in our childhood, well, at least we always had a roof over our heads, and I have my therapist like, well, that's kind of like the bare minimum of what parents should be providing. Yeah. But we hung our hat on that. Like we were never homeless, And so I think my danger meters were off. And so as I begun to hear this little voice or just little tinge of something, I began to trust myself and recognize that, I needed to pull on that string a little bit. And again, whether you're a believer or not, I just didn't take any coincidences as just a coincidence. So if I started hearing a certain thing in certain songs or just happening to catch this certain YouTube. I mean, I remember just random way, I found this book called The Emotionally Destructive Marriage. And it was like life-changing for me. And I don't even know how I got to it, but I stopped dismissing all those little things as just like, oh, that's random, or how did that happen? But I started taking stock of like, well, no, I've heard this kind of theme. Oh, like I'd never heard of Lisa TerKeurst. I didn't even never heard of Proverbs 31 Ministries, that she was this big deal. I just happened to find that podcast about therapy and theology. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I just started Googling everything about her. So again, all that to say, follow those breadcrumbs, follow those nudgings. Don't take anything by chance. If you have an inkling, like at a base deep level, I knew there was just something gravely wrong, and it didn't matter what I tried to throw at it. I couldn't get past it. But as I began to follow those little breadcrumbs into knowledge and understanding, and just to find language to what I was dealing with, it was life-changing for me. So just don't ignore the signs.
Oh, thank you. You hit it on the head with finding the language.
Yeah.
My own life. My husband, he's been open about his journey in therapy, and that's something we've talked so much about. I remember early on when he started, and there was finally words to describe his feelings. And I just remember the excitement seeing it. And it's like, I didn't get it at the time, because it was like, okay, but now it's like, oh my gosh, when you have felt or not felt or something for so long, and then to find, it's like so validating, because it goes back to that, you feel so alone and like you're the only one. And then when you find out that there's language around it, which actually means that you're not alone, that this is a real thing,
right?
There's such freedom found in that. So
yeah, because I'll say, I just shared in a blog post, when I remember, my main emotion was, I would just go to anger. I mean, I would, whatever was happening, I would be so angry. And I just thought anger, like I'm just mad, and I remember I was in like a leadership development course and got introduced to the emotion wheel, right? You could just Google that and find, and, we kind of went through this exercise about, like all the like 16 other sub feelings that are under anger, and looking up those words, and being able to truly define what is underneath this anger. And then kind of, you mentioned earlier, being able to verbalize my boundaries. And so, I'll own my part of just not being able to fully express, knowing there's certain things you shouldn't do that. That's hurting me. But I didn't really know how to express kind of what I need, how this is really affecting me, and then setting the boundary that would lead to a consequence. We would just have kind of these up and down.
Yeah.
He did X, I would get angry. He's sorry.
Yep.
Okay, just please don't do that again because it makes me angry. But we never got to like, no, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And it wasn't just anger. You know, there was a lot of things under there, violations, you know, I felt disrespected, you know, all these other things. And so that was huge. Again, that language of going from that big old hairy, just angry.
Well, then it makes it about you. It makes it, I have an anger issue.
Right.
And I need to work on my anger, and I need to work on just deep breathing. It's like, it has nothing to do with that. There's layers below that. So that's a huge thing. It's funny. I hadn't thought about that in a while. But I was, because like with raising kids, that's something like, I must have read something when they were little, but trying when they were young to like, you know, work through the feelings. And so there's been times where I've asked my daughter something like, you know, oh, are you angry? And she's been like, no, I'm this. And she'll tell me a different emotion. And I'm like, it even catches me by surprise sometimes. I'm like, wow, I don't know. I don't know why it surprises me, but it's like, yeah, we aren't just happy or sad. You know, that's like happy, sad,
That's
angry.
literally what I wrote in there, because I think we grew up with that. I know at least I did. As a kid, it's like you're happy or sad. Even at the doctor's office, like you're pointing at the frowny face or the happy face about how bad you feel, you know? And it's like, no, there's a lot more nuance there.
Needed. And it's funny because you talked about seeing the same message over and over again. And I don't know why, like it's on my mind, but it's that whole idea of the walking on eggshells. That's where I feel like we play the comparison game of whatever, you know, we just meaning people, we play that game of it's not this. And so we ignore the intuition, but it's like the universal thing is I feel like the eggshells, like as I get older, I'm realizing like, I thought eggshells were a normal part of life. I thought that's just what happens when you are good at reading people. But I'm learning now, like, oh, I think that has a lot to do with my childhood and how I'm managing emotions. And did you know that there's life beyond eggshells? Like, did you know, like this is me talking to myself, like, did you know that you can work on your stuff so that you can live your life not always worried about the eggshells?
Right.
That's a new concept to me. So
same. And I think for me, you know, another thing I had to realize is that because it showed up differently, you know, again, I had to get out of my black and white kind of if then. Like for me, it was, you know, growing up in just this chaos, domestic violence, fighting, unsafe, you know, unhealthy. Well, here we were, you know, Christians, and we go to church, we work in church, and, you know, we work hard. We had this stability, and I was holding on to just this certain stability of our home, our marriage, our life. But at the bottom line, it was the same chaos. It just showed up differently. And it just took so long for me to recognize, like you said, the eggshells, because that was the universal thing. That's how I felt in my childhood. We were just always kind of like bracing for the next shoe to fall and just trying to, you know, keep ourselves as low and minimize as possible. And it was the same thing, you know, at home. But again, I masqueraded it as, you know, well, dad is just tired, and well, we were loud, or we just need to, but it was the same thing. The eggshells. That's so true. It's just, it's a basic flag that no one should be walking and living in a place where they have to walk on eggshells at home, at work, or any relationship. It's just, it's so unhealthy.
Yeah.
So unhealthy.
It is, but it feels so normal. That's just what's so hard about all this. But Danielle, I appreciate you sharing your story and your journey to growth and healing, which, as you know, and it's ongoing. You know, I thought this whole thing, it's like, you just figure it out and you're done. You just wrap it up in a bow and we're done. But it is an ongoing thing. And which is why I love you said, we have to find the joy in the journey, because spoiler alert, we are not done. Our story is not over. this whole growth and healing thing, this is forever. And so I just appreciate you sharing this chapter right now, because I think, I'm so grateful you're using your voice in your blog and taking up more space, in the world with your voice, because I know that you have so much goodness to share. And I appreciate you sharing today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really have enjoyed this and getting to know you. And I love your podcast. I wish you much success with it. And just hope you reach as many people as possible.
Thank you. And it's really people like you and you specifically for sharing. And so if people want to get in touch with you and find your blog and find you online, how can they do that?
Well, thanks for asking. So I am on Instagram as I am Danny_1913. I'm currently blogging on the Medium platform. Just search for Danielle Ellis or Refreshing Words. Funny story. I have my own website, but I totally destroyed my blog on WordPress because I just don't know how to use WordPress. So one day that will be an actual refreshingwords.com. But so for now, I'm blogging on Medium, and I absolutely love it. So I would love people to follow me there.
And that's a wrap for now.
Thanks for listening to Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and rate us on iTunes. For all things Flushing, visit our website at flushingitout.com. This has been a Spitfire production.
That was the greatest thing I've ever heard.